So again, if you're just joining us, go ahead and say hello in the chat box, introduce yourself, let us know where you're coming from. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Laura Nelson. I'm the project leader for Rancher Stewardship Alliance. And we are just so thrilled to have you here tonight for our fourth and final session of the 2022 Spring Rural Resilience Seminar Series. And we have just a really, really exciting presentation tonight for you. We're thrilled that we have Alan and Alejandro with us tonight. What an honor and what a joy to get to hear their stories and hear their insights and expertise. Before we hand it over to Alan and Alejandro, I just want to share a little bit about who we are at Rancher Stewardship Alliance and why we're here. Rancher Stewardship Alliance is a rancher-led nonprofit organization based in Malta, Montana. Our mission statement is ranching, conservation, and communities, a winning team. And to us, that means a lot of things, but primarily it means that we believe that as ranchers, we can care for and steward these lands and landscapes, and we can feed the world while we do it. We can work with our conservation partners to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to care for this land and the wildlife and other animals and life that exists here on the prairie, and that we can do all of that while serving and sustaining thriving rural communities. And that to us is the ultimate winning team, those three things succeeding together. That's looked a lot of different ways over the years, but we started back in 2003 when about 30 ranchers in South Phillips County got together and were feeling like they were just under a lot of pressure that wasn't in their control. And they said, gosh, if we're gonna not just survive, but thrive and make our land and our ranches and our communities stronger, we've got to work together and we've got to start thinking outside the box and looking for solutions that will help us shape our own future. So that's very much what we still do today. And we're thrilled that we get to bring folks in that have great experience and expertise to help us continue to learn and grow, like Alan and Alejandro. So with that, we'll share a few little housekeeping items. You'll notice when you came into the room that you were put on mute, and we'll ask that you stay on mute throughout the presentation. But please just know that doesn't mean that we don't want you to participate and interact. We will have a pause between Alan and Alejandro's presentations tonight, where we'll go into a breakout room. And you guys can look to your neighbors and friends. And as we looked in the chat box, we know our neighbors are all over the country, which creates a really exciting opportunity to look at a fellow rancher in different environments and different experiences and say, what does this look like for you? Or what did you hear? Or how could we apply this? So be prepared for that breakout room, because we want you, if possible, to be able to come off mute and have your video on and engage in that conversation. We also invite you to use the chat box as much as possible throughout this evening. Please use that to leave comments, ask questions, share links or resources as we go. And we'll use that chat box to moderate the Q&A later on in the evening. I think that pretty much covers us for the housekeeping events. I will say that we are able to provide these webinars for free thanks to our grant funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And we just want to say thank you to them and say that if you appreciate and enjoy these educational events that we get to share and want to see them continue in the future, that you can support Rancher Stewardship Alliance on our website. And Angel has a link to that in the chat box. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Alan and Alejandro and take a breath. I just tried to cram a lot in a short amount of time so we could get to the main show. So with that, Alan Williams is a sixth-generation family farmer and founding partner of Grass-Fed Insights, LLC, Understanding Ag, and the Soil Health Academy. He's consulted with more than 4,000 farmers and ranchers in the US, Canada, Mexico, South America, and other countries on operations ranging from a few acres to 1 million acres. Alan pioneered many of the early regenerative grazing protocols and forage finishing techniques, and now teaches those practices and principles to farmers around the world. He's a recovering academic, having served 15 years on faculty at Louisiana Tech University and Mississippi State University. He holds a bachelor's and master's degree in animal science from Clemson University and a Ph.D. in livestock genetics from LSU. Alan, we're just so thrilled to have you here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Alejandro as well, and he'll take over after the break. After a successful career as an IT consultant in the US and other countries in the Americas and Europe, Alejandro Carrillo joined his family ranch back in 2004. Tired of the constant drought? Anybody feeling that this year? Tired of the constant drought and suffering that comes with traditional ranching in the Chihuahuan Desert, he searched for a better way to do things. Since 2006, he's adapted the principles of holistic planned grazing management to his ranch. Alejandro's credo is to mimic and respect nature and to stay and thrive in the cattle business. Alejandro holds a bachelor's in computer science from Monterey Tech and a master's in technical management from Johns Hopkins University. So with that, we just say thank you again, Alan and Alejandro. We're thrilled to have you, and we're going to go ahead and hand it over to Alan.
Thank you very much, Laura. Appreciate it. It's great to be here this evening. Looking forward to conversation in our Q&A later. I'm going to go ahead and share screen and get started. Okay. Angel, if you'll just give me confirmation that it is showing and my screen is up.
It looks good, Alan.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, again, good evening, everybody. What I want to talk to you tonight about is what we call the principles of regenerative agriculture. First, though, I want to just introduce you to who we are. Alejandro and myself are both part of Understanding Ag. We are a livestock and food industry and agricultural industry consultation firm that is comprised of real life farmers and ranchers, researchers, educators, and experts in regenerative agriculture. Practically all of us within Understanding Ag do own our own farms and our own ranches. So we implement the things that we also teach, promote, and advocate ourselves. We have consulted with more than 4,000 farmers and ranchers around the world, but that's not it. We also consult with food processors, branded food companies, quite a few institutions and agencies and NGOs. And as an example, some of the clients that we consult with are companies such as General Mills, Danone, Vital Farms, Whole Foods, Unilever, the Noble Research Institute, Turner Ranches, and many others. We presently have consulting staff in the US, Canada, Mexico, and the UK, and we've consulted in more than 34 different countries now in every one of the US states. And in the US alone, we're working across about 32 million acres right now that are under regenerative transition. And collectively within Understanding Ag, we have authored more than 500 articles, books, and been in quite a few different documentaries. So this is some of our team. This is not everybody that's on the Understanding Ag team, but I just wanted you to be able to see some of our faces, some of our people that are vital to our efforts in regenerative agriculture. So I'm going to start with this. All of us are facing some significant challenges and issues. You know, we're seeing more and more water and wind erosion, which results in significant loss of soil organic matter and carbon, loss of soil aggregate, which leads to a lack of water infiltration and retention. We've got nutrient leaching, water quality issues, water availability issues, greenhouse gas emission issues, and waste management issues. We're facing a lot of climatic challenges right now. Certainly all of you in the West, you know, are under some form of drought. we have seen a significant decline in the nutritive value of our foods. And of course, none of us do not know about the skyrocketing prices for ag inputs. You know, since 2020, the price for practically everything that we deal with in agriculture has increased from 2 times to more than 4 times. We also see a lot of consumer confusion about agriculture and what's right, what's wrong. But the way we view this is all of these challenges are also opportunities. If we can effectively address and solve these challenges, then they become incredible opportunities for us. And we'll talk about that as we go through this evening. This is the most recent U.S. Drought Monitor. And as you'll see, it encompasses practically the entire western half of the U.S. And you can also see that compared to last year and the year before, our drought has just continued to creep east. So it hasn't diminished at all. It's continued to spread. So certainly we've got to look at strategies that are going to allow us to be able to reduce and then mitigate these drought impacts. I love this quote by W.C. Loudermilk in Conquest of the Land Through 7,000 Years. Loudermilk says, "The land does not lie. It bears a record of what men write on it, a record that is easy to read by those who understand the simple language of the land." So, in effect, our management is written on the tapestry of the land. And you have to have a definition for regenerative agriculture. This is our definition. It is farming and ranching in synchrony with nature and the 4 ecosystem processes to repair, rebuild, revitalize, and restore ecosystem function, starting with life beneath the soil and expanding to life above. And that part is critical. If we don't first focus on life beneath the soil and restoring it, we're going to do an incredibly poor job of expanding life above the soil. Now, to accomplish this, we use what we now term the 6-3-4. And I'm going to explain the 6-3-4 to you briefly this evening. But before I start that, I'm going to give you this quote by Don Campbell. "If you want to make small changes, change the way you do things. But if you want to make major changes, you have to change the way you see things." So with that in mind, let's sort of dive into the 6-3-4. What is it? What are we talking about? Well, it starts with the 6 principles of soil health. And so I'm just going to briefly go through these. Probably many of you have heard these before, but I'm just going to give you a little refresher here. So the first principle is know your context. The truth is the other 5, principles 2 through 6, can never be appropriately and adequately applied if we don't first take time to understand our individual farm and ranch context. And this context is all encompassing. It's not just what's happening right now, but it's your history on your farm, on your ranch, the history that you know about. And then it's what we call the historical ecological context. What was the history where you're located 300, 400, 500 years ago, or even 1,000 years ago? What grew there? What lived there? How vibrant and how abundant was it at that period in time? And then context also incorporates your family dynamics and the dynamics of everyone that works with and for you. It incorporates everybody that you work with, your goals and objectives, your financial goals and objectives. So all of that is included within context, and we have to first take time to define that before we can fully understand how to apply the other 5 principles. So whenever we work with a client, that's the first thing we do. We flesh out their context so that we know how to take the other 5 principles and appropriately apply them to their operation. So the second principle is minimize disturbance. We want as little disturbance on the ground and in the soil as possible. And this includes mechanical disturbance, such as tillage. It includes chemical disturbance. It includes overgrazing. Overgrazing is certainly a disturbance as well that can be very damaging. The next principle, the third principle, is keep our soil covered, protected, keep it armored. And in this period of drought, this is even more important. Soils that are not covered are going to have a much harder time both making it through the drought and recovering from the drought and even alleviating drought conditions. So keeping the soil covered is a critical principle. Next is the principle of diversity. We have to mix it up. And this means diversity in everything. If you're planting and growing crops, you need to have greater diversity in your cash crop rotation than many farmers do presently. We have to have more diversity in our pastures and on our rangeland. And this is not just diversity in plant species, but diversity in the microbial population that lives beneath the soil surface, diversity in insects, birds, wildlife, livestock, and anything else that we have there. The fifth principle is keep living roots in the soil as long as possible. And basically this means year round. And because we have worked all over North America, including well north into Canada, including in the Northwest Territories, we have found that even in the colder climes, we can keep living roots in the soil year round. It can be done. And then the final principle is animal integration, livestock integration. Pretty much all of North America evolved under the influence of grazing, browsing, and foraging animals. And what we have found is that when we use them appropriately, then they help speed up the process of building our soil and regenerating our ecosystems. So those are the 6 principles of soil health. Then we have what we call the 3 rules of adaptive stewardship. The first rule is a rule of compounding. And it simply means this: there never are any singular effects, ever. This applies to our farms, our ranches, our soils, our livestock, and even to us in our interpersonal relationships. If I say the wrong thing to my wife, that never results in a singular impact. It's a compounding impact that can actually go on for a very long time. So everything causes compounding effects. And here's the other thing: these compounding effects are never neutral. They're either positive or negative. So what we need to be focused on is, first of all, realizing that every decision we make, or even decisions we don't make, regardless of which it is, these compounding effects are occurring. We can't stop them from occurring. So the only question is, are we implementing management decisions that allow us to be able to produce positive compounding effects, or are we facilitating negative compounding effects? The next rule is the rule of diversity. Just like diversity in the 6 principles, we need diversity in adaptive stewardship. And again, the same thing, diversity in everything out there. And then the final one, the final rule, is a rule of disruption. We have found that nature can become stagnant. Our farms, our ranches, our fields can become stagnant if we settle into a prescriptive routine, a formula, and we're just doing the same things the same way, month in, month out, year in, year out. That doesn't work. It just simply doesn't work. When we do that, we will always hit a wall, and we'll stop making progress, and we'll wonder. We'll even ask ourselves, why have we stopped making progress? And then we'll actually start to digress. We'll go backwards. And again, we're left wondering why. So I like to use this analogy to help you understand the rule of disruption. Think of an elite athlete. So when I was in college, I was a collegiate wrestler. And as an athlete, you learn very quickly that if you're going to continue to progress, you must continue to introduce disruptions in your exercise routine. If you do the same exercise routine at the same duration and intensity, day in and day out, month in and month out, year in and year out, you're going to hit a wall, and you're going to quit making progress. And then you're not going to be able to maintain the same level of athletic performance. You're going to go backwards. So the only way you can progress as an athlete is to continue to alter that exercise routine. And what are those alterations? They are planned, purposeful disruptions. And we can introduce planned, purposeful disruptions into our operations, both farming and grazing, to help us continue to make progress. Now, I've got entire articles, and we actually have entire webinars on this. So I'm covering it very briefly this evening because of our limited time, but you're welcome to go on our website at understandingag.com and to read and watch a lot more about these planned, purposeful disruptions. I'll give you just a handful tonight so you can get an idea of what they are. One is altering stock density, pounds of animals per acre that you're grazing. Alter stock density. Don't graze every time at the same stock density. Another is alter rest periods. And I know Alejandro's going to talk about that and how that has significantly benefited him in the desert, altering his rest periods in his pastures and on his rangeland. A third is alter the grazing height on and off. Another one is alter paddock configuration. The configuration of a paddock, the shape of that paddock actually makes a huge difference in the amount of impact that you're going to get on any one grazing event. Another one is alter the time or season of year that you may be grazing a particular paddock, pasture, or section of rangeland. And again, there's many more, and you can read about those and learn about those on our website. But that gives you an idea of some of the planned, purposeful disruptions that we can introduce. And then finally, we implement the 6 principles and the 3 rules to optimize the 4 things that are free to us every day, the 4 ecosystem processes. Now, right now, today, this is more important than ever, because every other input cost in agriculture has risen significantly. So what we want to do is make sure that we're optimizing energy flow, which means photosynthetic activity from the sun. We want to make sure we've got plenty of solar panels out there on our plants, that we're leaving plenty of residual behind after every graze, if at all possible, so that we've still got solar panels that can capture and photosynthesize. We want to optimize the water cycle, the mineral cycle, also known as the nutrient cycle, and what we call community dynamics, or also diversity. So I want to point out one thing here. You noted that in the 6 principles, one of the principles is diversity. In the 3 rules, one of the rules is diversity. And in the 4 ecosystem processes, one of the processes is diversity. That's how important diversity is. It's in all 3 of the 6, 3, 4. It is that critical. And what we have found in every single case, and again, Alejandro will address this as well, in every single case, in every farm and ranch we've ever worked with, anywhere, not just here in the US, but in any other country that we've worked in. If we can improve and increase and enhance diversity, everything else improves rather quickly and rather dramatically. So here's the top 3 barriers to adoption of the 6 principles, the 3 rules, and the 4 ecosystem processes. Lack of education and awareness. You cannot implement what you do not know. Those of you on the webinar tonight, you are educating yourselves. You're learning. So I applaud you. This is in for, you know, what you're doing with, you know, rancher stewardship. You know, this is what you're doing. You're educating people. So we absolutely applaud that. The second is peer pressure. I've been in agriculture my entire life, grew up on my family's farm. They've been there since 1840. And I can tell you, peer pressure in agriculture is very, very real. And it comes from many, many different sources. Unfortunately, in agriculture, oftentimes, if we do something different than our farmer and rancher neighbors, they don't like it. And they talk about us. And many times we succumb to that peer pressure. And then the third is debt load. Our debt load is the greatest that it's ever been. And this oftentimes, unfortunately, keeps people from making the right decision about what they need to do on their farms and ranches. So what we find is that as we move along the continuum of implementing the 6-3-4, that we start to see life explode, starting with life beneath the soil surface, expanding to life above, just like the definition of regenerative agriculture that I gave you this evening. And I want to end with this. I just want to give you an example. In March, some of us from our Understanding Ag team were out in California for 2 weeks, working out there. And we went through almost the entirety of the Central Valley. This is what we saw through the vast majority of the Central Valley. And I can tell you, the Central Valley is in deep, deep trouble right now, very deep trouble. And this is an example of why. You cannot have bare soil like this and not have drought. This precipitates drought. So, but this is what we saw mile after mile after mile driving through the Central Valley. And then this is a university orchard, and this is supposed to be a model orchard. And we did a little workshop out there, and I can tell you, it's not very good. Okay, their soil's heavily compacted. You know, they are highly reliant on external expensive inputs, chemical and synthetic. You know, very poor aggregate and water infiltration and so forth. And yet, this is how farmers are being taught to do this out there. But I'm going to leave you with this. This is what orchards should look like. This orchard is also in the Central Valley. This is one of our clients, Daniel Unruh is his name. And this is what Daniel's orchard looks like right now. Right now, I took these pictures just 3 weeks ago. So the other orchards were what we saw all through the Central Valley. We get to Daniel's, and this is what Daniel's looks like. So he came to one of our soil health academies 4 years ago and dramatically altered what he is doing. And these are the results today, just 4 years later. You can see the incredible growth here that is supporting fertility and viability and insect and disease resistance for his walnut trees. Again, additional views of his orchards. And this is what he's also doing. This is 1,000 head of sheep that are grazing through his orchards. So Daniel has been able to significantly cut any kind of synthetic or chemical input, as well as irrigation applications, because he has applied the 6, the 3, the 4 to what he's doing. And of course, the 6th principle out of the 6 principles is integration of livestock. And you can see that that's exactly what he's doing here. So he's reaping huge dividends from this combination. And not only the growing of these cover crops and the grazing of these cover crops by these 1,000 head of sheep is benefiting him, but it's significantly benefiting his bottom line, not just because his orchard is healthier and producing better and requires lower inputs, but also because in these same orchards, he now has a second revenue stream from the sheep. So now he's reaping more from the exact same acres that initially he was only getting one income stream from. So I'm going to stop there and stop my sharing and allow y'all to go into the first breakout session.
All right. Thank you, Alan. And what an exciting and hopeful note to end on and go into discussion with. So I appreciate that. We appreciate you. We're going to go into a breakout room right now. If you guys have been on our rural resilience webinars before, you know how these work. Joining us back from the breakout rooms, go ahead and share some of those common thoughts or ideas or questions that you had, and we'll turn it over to Alejandro.
Alejandro, do you have the share screen option?
Yeah, let me go ahead then.
Okay. There we go.
Can you see it?
Yep.
Looks good.
Well, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to present some of the work that we have done down in the Chihuahuan Desert in Chihuahua, Mexico. Let's go. I'm gonna take a tour, virtual tour. Let's put it that way, of what we have done there, applying the principles and that Alan just shared with us. So to give you a little bit of the context, we are nested right in the Chihuahuan Desert. Actually, we have had our average precipitation is supposed to be 10 inches, 10.5, but on the last 4 years, we have had only 8 inches of annual precipitation. This is our ranch or property. As you can see, we have like mountain range and flat land and some of the malpais or volcanic hills. When we think about the Chihuahuan Desert, that's a very typical view. I mean, all degraded land, a few mesquites, people actually having to provide some hay for the cows, otherwise there's really not much for them to eat. And I want to share with you actually this graph where it actually is actually in sync when our family bought the ranch 41 years ago. So you can see on the first 20 years, from 1981 to 2001, we got definitely more rain, because if I get the average of all these 41-year period, our average would be 11.5, not 10.5. So what I did was I split this graph into the first 20 years, and the first 20 years from 1981 to 2001, the average was 12.5. And now on the next 10 years is 10.5. So something is really clear to me. I mean, we're getting less rain, as Alan mentioned, because there's so much bare ground everywhere you go. And the droughts are more severe, because on the first 20 years, the drought was like 8 inches. Now our droughts are like 4 inches per year. So definitely this has to be something that should motivate us to actually do something different, because we actually do not have the conditions that we used to have. This is a different world that we're living right now, and we gotta adjust ourselves for the new conditions. Just to continue with to give you the context of our ranch, it's a 30,000 acre ranch. We are running 550 cows, 200 sheep. As I said, it's just like 8 inches on the last 4 years. We don't give any input but sea salt. One of our main goals here is to lower the cost, because many people think about, oh yeah, I'm going to apply these principles to increase the herd. You will eventually increase the herd, you increase the grass. Our main goal is actually to lower the cost, to lower the inputs. That's actually what's killing a lot of ranchers. We did not use any chemical, mechanical seeding or irrigation to restore native grasslands. And the only tool is just properly manage cows. And we are part of over 2 million acres in the northern Mexico, in Chihuahua, Mexico. So we really have a good community of regen ranchers there, which actually helps a lot. This is our rainfall pattern. If you see, we're in April right now, so we do not expect much rain. So what happened with that is that we pretty much get the rain in 3 months, and then we need to prepare to stockpile grasses to get our cows with no inputs all the way from actually September, October, let's say, all the way through August. Why August? Because actually, when it starts raining in July, it doesn't rain grass. You gotta wait a little bit for it. That's a picture of 10 years ago. That's actually how our ranch looked like in winter. And you may say, well, that's a never-ending ranch. And you see there's grass there, but actually the sad part of that is that all the grass is oxidized. So just keep in mind that the grass not only is killed by overgrazing, but also by overresting. I mean, cows being too selective on a big pasture, and they ended up killing the best grasses and leaving the ones that they don't like, and the grasses that do not work, they eventually die. This is a picture of this winter at our ranch. See how different is the color of the grass. Now that grass has some nutrition for the cows. I want to include this picture because we actually have like this big fight in nature saying, oh, you know, like in this woody plant may be displacing my grasses. And you see, I mean, we're growing grasses. We work for what we want. And we don't care about what we call the invasive species. The good part here is that that grass did not read the books about being displaced by those woody plants. So as we work with nature, actually it's very dynamic. So whatever we're doing in our ranches is taking us forward or backwards. And we are not alone. I mean, we depend also on neighboring properties and at a county level, state level, and country level. I took this temperature like a month ago on my way to the ranch. It was 4 p.m. Think about what bare ground does for our land. It was already, no, it was 10 a.m. It was already 113 Fahrenheit. And the temperature was like 85. That same day we got to the ranch, we pointed that thermometer or on our grasslands, it was 75. So fortunately, when we don't have a good ground cover, we lose a lot of moisture by evaporation. Now let's take a quick tour on the ranch. So I'm driving to the ranch, and then I first hit one of the neighboring properties, and you see so far we got 6 inches of rain. At that point in time, I think it was August already. Unfortunately, this particular ranch has all the soils compacted. Now I get into my ranch like half an hour from there, and then you see the difference. With the same 6 inches of rain, we can grow much more grass, greener grasses. I took these pictures the same day, going to my ranch on a dirt road. And if you see the upper left is just bare ground, a lot of soil lost. The upper right is more rotational grazing, big pastures, rotating the cattle to match selective grazing. And the bottom part is my ranch. You can see even just by looking at the color of the grass that is much healthier than on neighbor properties. This is my neighbor on the south. So actually the inside part of that is my ranch in the spring after 6 months of no rain. So you see how we're working towards having more perennial grasses. Annuals are good on rangeland, but really what it really takes you all the way through all these non-growing months is perennial grasses. And the other side of the fence is my neighbor, and that's his perennial grasses are just not growing. Another good indicator for us to see how healthy our grasslands is the leaf to stem ratio. This is the same grass, it's just in different management. The left side is my ranch, the right side is my neighbor. So you see on my side, picture taken on the same day, that is a much better solar panel and is much better for the cows, for the microbiology and so on. This is a closer look of the same grass. I mean, unfortunately, perennial grasses are kind of sick. They behave like annual grasses. They are very sick, very shallow roots, and so on. That grass on the right is more from my property, and I will never be able to pull that grass with all the roots because it has very deep roots. I also took this picture the same day. On left side is a nearby property, and right side is my property. Just rainfall, no irrigation. So you can see that really management does make a big difference. This is one of the few pictures that I actually have a sequence of pictures of what happened with the proper grazing management. This was taken in 2015. Now you can see that what we call the Elephant Butte mountain range, mountain that I have as a ranch. So you see some more bare ground here, a little bit of weeds. And then 3 years later, we got a better cover of weeds, not much perennials yet. And then you got in 2021, much more grass now. So I do expect that place in the future to actually grow these 7 feet tall grasses, which is green spangle top, which we never imagined that we would have at the ranch, 7 feet tall grasses. Actually, one of my hairy big goals is for the cows to get lost on the grass. So I think most of us know about effective rainfall, and that really is very important. But what about rainmaking? And you see here comparing at the ranch, a bare ground spot and a spot that we've been working on the lower part. And there's a 16 inches difference of effective rainfall of infiltration rate. So that's actually very important for ranches to feed the microbiology, the fungi, so they can create these spaces in the soil and infiltrate more water. But what about this picture? Was it really a picture that was like the perfect time? This is not in my property, but it's in a property nearby my ranch, where the left side is under regenerative ranching. The right side is conventional ranching. And I mean, it's a coincidence, right, that it did rain at that point more. But to be honest with you, all of us who are practicing this kind of management, we are getting more rain. I mean, we're getting more rain, and we are seeing how these ranches are connected, at least on the air, forming these storms that go from one side to the other. It's just really amazing. So how about this, what we call the soil engineers? Is it really that we're relying on the cows to do all the work? Well, how about that cow pie? That's a nice shaped cow pie. Unfortunately, I have to tell you that it's all oxidized. So we are handicapped with the power of a cow pie, because most likely this rancher apply ivermectin or some other things that are killing the soil engineers or the dung beetles, termites, and so on. How about that cow pie? Is that a nice cow pie for I think that's too much green, too much protein. I think we're losing big time there as well. So this is a picture in my ranch. See all the activity that is going on. Thanks to these creatures that work 24/7, we can actually be able to get all that manure into the soil. This is a side view of the cow pie. It's just incredible how much fertility. Instead of the cow pie getting oxidized there, I mean, we just love these creatures because they help us actually fertilize our rangeland. This is the result actually of that cow pie from last year, how it does create a microclimate, and now that actually help with growing new grass on bare spots. That's another example of the micro climate that is created on cow pies. And this is another example. It's pretty amazing what you can do with that so much carbon concentrated in just one single spot. Another really interesting event that is going on at the ranch is that most of the ranch is actually moving away from mesquites. We never fight the mesquites. They're just drying up. I mean, and you can change the name of mesquite for cholla or juniper or whatever you want to throw there. Woody plants are invading our landscape because of the way we manage. But if you manage for having more perennial grasses, some of those woody plants are just gonna die and dry. So what is the difference between us applying some chemicals to kill the mesquite and letting nature take its course? See more dead mesquite there. I do expect my ranch, they will be just grasslands, but with new trees, not exactly mesquite, but something that will support the more moist bacterial environment. So this is what's going on. This is what I call the cycle of life. Well, the mesquite is dying. Then you got on the right upper side the beetles. It's not the dung beetles. It's a beetle that is pruning the branches. They fall down, and then you got the termites taking those branches. And then you may be wondering, well, so how about the legumes? Because the mesquites are legumes. Who's going to put the nitrogen? Well, the termites actually have the richest gut nitrogen bacteria gut of any insect. So now instead of me having mesquites, now I'm having these insects that are actually putting the nitrogen into the soil. See, even the oxidized grass is being taken by these soil engineers and taken down as putting nitrogen into the soil. So one thing that is very important here on this conversation is we don't go and actually split it into we don't really spread all the investment across the ranch. What we do is we prioritize areas and we try to pick the low-hanging fruit. For example, this is a map of my ranch. You see the green areas are the most productive ones. So I will apply most of my investment in fencing and water on those areas. And I will not really care much about the other areas. But then eventually it will go and migrate to the pink and then to the yellow and at the end to the red. That will be a much better return on investment on your time and money by prioritizing your better areas first and working on those areas and giving the proper rest area, the proper rest periods. Because what we have seen in mostly in a lot of places in the US is people are actually getting too soon into the same spot. This is some examples of the water system, fixed water system that we have. Portable water system is a combination and a different design. These are actually like 80%, probably I would say 85% of our fences are one single wire electric fence. And the rest is polywire. It's just examples of our defense we use. Corner posts, very simple ones. Insulators. I do prefer not to have metal, but anyway, that's there I do have in some parts. And this is where we graze our mountain range, or sierra as we call it. It's all polywire, all portable. This area we only been grazing this area for 2 years because we did not have water before, but the result is just amazing. See how creative people are. It doesn't matter what you have in front of you. If you're intentional to make it work, you will make it work. Even the corner posts are kind of funny there. Actually, we got the permit to export this to the US, so may work in your place. We don't know. This is the kind of animal impact we do at that mountain range. It's just incredible. It's just like you put a dozen of bulldozers there and cutting all the grass, and then we leave the whole place for 1 full year of rest. Why? Because we have warm season grasses, we have cool season grasses on that mountain range. So, and then also we have this strangle top, 7 feet tall. If we were going to graze multiple times per year, we will be killing one of the best grasses. Genetics. So we do have a lot of selection because remember, the cows are our best tools. So we want to easy fleshing, low maintenance cows. These 2 cows are from the same herd, and you can see actually huge differences. We are very keen into body condition, and we cull every year. I mean, at that point we act as a predator. Look at these 2 bulls. I mean, they weigh the same. Which one will give you the best heifers? But what about the frame? I mean, that tall pencil gut bull actually is much taller than the other bull. So we obviously will we will prefer to have the bull on the left. This is a nice bull of a close herd for 60 years in Mexico. A nice cow from the same herd. That's why, I mean, we are very, for us, it's very important for the cows to keep a good body condition most of the year. This is what we call adaptation. I mean, those cows are actually looking for grasses on the cholla cactus. And these are a couple of cow and a heifer in my ranch eating prickly pear. Don't worry, I mean, they learn how to take that pad, scratch it into the soil, get rid of the spines, and then eat it. And this is actually how that cactus actually ended up after the cows eat them all. What happened if I start giving some kind of supplement to my cows? They may stop doing that kind of behavior. So to sum up this presentation, actually, we make ourselves more resilient by actually making a good animal impact combined with long rest periods. I mean, my rest periods are between 12 months and 15 months at the ranch, and actually using adapted genetics. I mean, not using, but actually it's good for you to buy these low maintenance genetics, but it's up to us actually to select for what our ranch particularly needs, because each ranch is unique in his management and in his land. So you have to develop your own genetics for your own ranch. And there's another product here that I want to sell. That's a solar donkey. So actually the message here is this guy doesn't have roads, doesn't have really an easy way to take that energizer, and he just did it. I mean, he's just doing it. So there's really no limitation in when we are actually very interested on making this happen. Thank you very much. That's the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Alejandro. That was wonderful. We're going to move into a Q&A. And as we do that, and as we have folks typing some questions into the chat box to kick that off, Alejandro, I'm going to ask you to bring your slides back up. And I just want to ask a follow-up question there. I'd love if you could bring your slide back up and go back to that those 3 years of, or those 3 different years of the same location that you showed. And it was kind of early in your presentation. And as folks are thinking about their questions, would you mind just going through and explaining what you were doing and what choices you were making in your management as that piece of land in particular went through that evolution that you shared.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
This one?
Yep, that one. So yeah, take us through the evolution of your management from here in 15 to 21 where it ended. What was going on there?
Yeah, actually, if you can see, there's a fence there. So we already have this pre-established fixed paddocks, like a long 3,000 feet long, 600 feet wide fixed paddocks. And what we're playing with two variables there: timing of the paddock, depending on the forage availability, and also the size of the paddock. So those paddocks are like a long strips, 3,000 feet long and 600 feet wide. In order for us, when we grow grass, we're gonna start cross fencing. In this particular day, we only put the cattle there for probably half a day, because as you see, we did not have much. There's some few people in Mexico there, because most ranches in Mexico do not produce hay, that they do bale grazing, and they have good results. It's a way to speed up the process. We did not use that because we're pretty far from an expensive buying hay. So that first year, we just have like the density is lower because the paddock was bigger, and then we provide a full year of rest on this particular paddock. Now, the following year, now you can see that we have a little bit more perennials, more weeds. So instead of one day, we jump into to half a day, we jump into one full day. Let's say on probably those are like 50-acre paddocks, about 50-acre paddocks. Now, on 2021, because we grow, and we keep doing that full year of rest. As we grow more grass, and we want to keep our moves on once a day moves, then visually we assess that particular paddock, and we say, now we can split it in two. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to split it exactly at the right in the middle of that long strip. It depends where the grass is. So you move that cross fence, whatever you think is actually about the same forage quantity. So it's really more like an art than a science, where you learn how to observe, and every paddock is different, and every year could be different because of rainfall and so on. But that was actually the evolution of that succession there.
Thanks. And I have a couple of questions in the chat box particular to this, Alejandro. Penny is curious, how many animals did you have on there, and how did that stocking rate vary over those years? And then earlier she had also asked if you had seeded any of that grass, or if it had come back on its own.
Yeah, it has come back on its own, but just remember that we did not have farming before. Farming is something more aggressive with soil. So what happened on that particular area is that nature thought about, oh my God, this guy is not doing a good job. Let me seal the seeds and let's put a hard pan on top of it. So we actually analyzed all the seeds that was under this bare ground hard pan, and it was full of seeds. So what we really had to do was to create the conditions for those seeds to germinate. But also you have to respect the succession of nature from weeds, from bare ground to weeds, to annuals, to perennials. I mean, there are some people going to my ranch and they are grabbing like the perennial grasses, side oats, grandma grass, maybe some of those grasses you also have the same grasses. And it doesn't work that way. I mean, you have to create the conditions first before you actually let the nature just. Nature, I feel that it's like has like a command control where it just push buttons to say, this is what you need right now. So you're ready for this, you're ready for this. So it's so smart. And when we joined the ranch, we were running, my dad was running 150 cows, and we were leasing a place with another 100 cows. But that just so right now, instead of the 150 cows, we're running 550 cows. But that's just part of the equation, because one of the main goals for me was to lower the cost of the off. So my dad was really feeding the cows from March all the way through July, August. Now I'm not feeding the cows at all. So I do remember also back in 2011, we have a big drought of 4 inches. 2011, 55 pastures. We gotta lease a place to take all of our cows out. Now, in 10 years after 2020, we had the same drought, even a little bit worse, 4 inches. And we could keep the 550 cows, but we destocked and we sold 150 cows. So at the end of the growing season, we always evaluate how much grass we have, how many cattle we have. Do we need more cows? Great. Can we support our cows and a little bit more, because you're always on the conservative side? Can we run these 550 cows for the next 14 months? I never bet on August. I always bet on October, the end of the growing season. So right now, for example, 40% of my ranch is still full of grass, and we are about 3 months. So I have just plenty of grass right now, but I prefer to be that way than just on lack of grass.
Yeah. Alejandro, could you explain what the numbers in the parentheses on this slide, what those numbers mean?
Yeah, that's let me go back. That's highlighting what on those 6 years, 9 years, the rainfall per year. I mean, the amount of inches per year. Because sometimes people might think, well, yeah, you did get a lot of rain. Actually, when I joined the ranch back in 2004, my dad had a big present for me, 20 inches of rain in the desert.
Wow.
Unfortunately, all it did was just cause a lot of destruction. We did not grow much grass. We still feed the cows. So really, it's not how much rain you get, but what you do with that rain. Do you know that actually out of the rain we get, most ranchers only infiltrate like 20% of the rain? So on that, probably I was infiltrating like 0.2%. Of that 20 inches was 4 inches. And that's one of the reasons why we just cannot get out of the drought, because we don't have that infiltration rate, a better infiltration rate.
Thank you, Alejandro. And Stacy Barta just made a great note. If you are enjoying hearing from Alejandro, we want to remind you that he'll be in Montana at the Montana Range Tour in Great Falls in late August for 2 days. So we're excited to have you in Montana in person. So that'll be a real treat to get to ask more questions. You mentioned again, Alejandro, the importance of focusing on reducing inputs. And Linda made a great comment earlier here in the chat session, in the chat box, about what a great principle worth remembering, especially in times like now when inflation and those input costs are going crazy. Tell us a little bit more, if you can, about what that looked like. Was that a gradual reduction? Were there things that you just like quit cold turkey, I'm done with this? What did that look like for you to strategically decrease those inputs?
Yeah, actually, as I told you, probably on those first years, I mean, not counting inflation, you know, like from 18 years ago, but we were spending probably like $50,000 just on those few months. I don't know what's the current value of that, but it's a lot of money, and not counting even indirect costs on that. And nowadays, actually, everything depends on what the ranch produces, and that's why we are so keen to actually make sure that the stocking rate we have at the end of the growing season, which is the beginning of November for us, we have more grass than we can eat. What happens if we have more grass? Well, we can do stock operation. We can lease some of our part of the land, and I mean that's pretty much it. Now our cost right now is about $150 per cow per year. So that's really very important for us, because a lot of times we're trying to get these added value programs, but really, if we were able to reduce our cost, even if you ended up in the commodity market, you will make a profit. If it goes up, you make more profit. If you get into the grass-fed market, you make more profit. But actually, I think that the ranch has to be profitable just by being the ranch and the grass-fed enterprise should be a different enterprise. So we strive to get the ranches, first of all, profitable, and then actually you will be able to increase your herd. The growing the grass is really not the problem, I only need 6 inches to grow the grass for the next 15 months, where I am right now. But actually the genetics is a challenge because that's a lifetime commitment to always select and select and select, and to keep your herd clean, as I call it. You know, like what happens if you don't select often and you just wait like once a year? You will always have those cows are in poor condition, the hair coat doesn't look good, they are raising a dinky calf. And then, for example, I invite my dad and he will complain because he doesn't care about the 490 cows. He will care about those 10 cows that are in poor condition. I don't let those cows sleep. I don't let those cows just mix with my herd. And because we're seeing the cows once or twice a day, that's where we spend most of our time. We don't just open the gate and let the cows move. We go there, spend some time, they're all together. In 1 hour, we can see all the cows, but I'm trying to spot the poor performing cows. And I'm not comparing against a magazine. I'm not comparing against some frame score. I'm just comparing and seeing what is the bottom of my cows right now.
Thank you. Well, you brought up genetic selection. About the same time, we got a question in the chat box, and so wondered if you would just expound a little bit about genetic selection in a drought. Are there drastic changes that you would suggest in drought conditions in your genetic selection, or are those subtle changes over the years that you make through that selection process?
No, actually, we increase the culling rate during a drought. Actually, for us, drought has been an opportunity to stress test our water system, because remember, most ranchers, the main problem where I am at least is not actually the grass, it's the water. The water, suddenly the ranch doesn't have water, and it doesn't matter if you have grass, you don't have the most important nutrient, which is water, clean, sufficient water, then it doesn't matter how much grass we have. And yeah, we call harder when it's a drought. We just take it as an opportunity to actually improve our genetics. And the ideal situation would be for us to sell the cows when they're fat, let's say in fall. But if that wasn't really sufficient, then we keep calling and calling and calling, even though understanding that the prices may not be the best during a drought, you know. But yeah, we just increase the percentage. What we usually do is we have thresholds. For example, in an average year, we may call 20% of the cows just based on hair coat and body condition. And we all also look for the cows that will never give you a problem, are in good body condition, nice hair coat, and then look at a bull calf from that cow. And that's how we don't actually make much products from culling. We make most of the products we made is actually from promoting the good genetics, the good genes from my herd.
Okay, thanks, Alejandro. Before I ask the next couple of questions, I want to make sure we bring Alan back as well, and let you guys know we want to open this up to be an open Q&A. Alan, anything that you want to add after Alejandro's presentation, or any thoughts or comments on any of those questions that we had so far?
Well, I guess a couple of things real quick. Too often we think that seeding something is the solution to our problem. And as you'll note with Alejandro and with many of our other clients in similar environments, what we have found is that the latent, what we call the latent seed bank, the seed bank that already exists in the soil, actually is going to give us the very best response. And it's going to produce the things that are the very best plants to grow. there. You know, I've been a research scientist for many years. I've been a rancher my entire life. And I have to admit to you, I don't think we're smart enough to know what to seed, especially in perennial. You know, every time that we have done this, what nature has given us from the seed bank, if we just apply the principles and the rules, is by far better than anything we could have possibly have seeded ourselves. So I would encourage you to think more about, just like Alejandro's example and what he accomplished on his ranch there in the Chihuahuan Desert, to think more about implementing practices that are going to tap into that latent seed bank. And we've done this literally all over North America now, and we really haven't run up on any place where there's still not a pretty vibrant latent seed bank. We just have to implement those practices that are going to cause it to, you know, respond. However, Alejandro made one more comment. He said, you know, if land has been cropped for a significant period of time, then you may need to think about seeding something. And he is correct. But we never start with a perennial seeding, ever. In that instance, we always start with highly diverse annual plantings first. We call those biological primers. What we often find is that if land has been heavily tilled and cropped for a period of time, it's not biologically ready to support perennials at that point. So by starting with a diverse annual mix and planting it for a period of 2 or 3 years and grazing it, you are priming that soil and that biology in the soil to then be able to tap that latent seed bank and to get the perennial response. And then on the genetics question, we also cannot overlook epigenetics. Too often we focus purely on what we think about as genetic selection, and we don't think nearly as much about the epigenetics. And if you don't know what epigenetics is, that is the influence of environmental factors on the degree of gene expression in an individual. So what we often find is that animals that work by far the best in our environment, and by the way, this goes for crops as well, okay, are animals that we focus on epigenetic selection first and foremost. In other words, animals that fit our environment, fit our context, and crops that fit our environment and fit our context. Way too often, we try to force genetics of our livestock and force genetics of our crops onto our situation, and epigenetically, they're not prepared to work.
Thanks, Alan. I want to ask this question to the both of you. I think, Alejandro, it came from looking directly at some of your slides, but Alan, I'd like you to expand on what else you've seen. Alejandro, you said that some of your neighbors use bale grazing to put some cover on bare ground. And we had a question in here that just asked, when starting with very degraded bare ground, are there any things that you practice in addition to that high density long rest period grazing that helps add cover and stimulate growth there?
Yeah, and I'm going to give you an example. For example, I'm helping my neighbor. He has a big ranch. I would say that 70% of his ranch is bare ground. It's just in a terrible stage. So you have to actually walk and take a look at the whole, like an assessment of the ranch. So we're starting in about, it's a big ranch. We're starting about 10,000 acres that are just still has some grass. So he's gonna focus on just that part and develop the water there because all the rest is bare ground. Now, one of the challenges with those ranches, big ranches, is that how you connect that part with another place that has grass. So you have to actually plan for that, to build that corridor, and those corridors, most likely, we will have to do some bale grazing. because then how are you going to move the cows from one place to the other? So, but we usually try to find first those places where you still have some grass. And many times people still have grass where they don't have water because they haven't been able to, the cows to get there. So it's first like a really seeing across the whole ranch where what is the easiest spot for you to start. You don't have to start like the whole thing. You have to start, you can start like even 5% of your ranch, do some intensive grazing, then protect that area the full year with no animals. And then you'll see not only the animal impact, but also the power of rest. I think we're underestimating the power of rest in most of the U.S. Western U.S.
Alan, anything to add there?
Yeah, we've used bale grazing extensively in many situations to create what we refer to as biological hotspots. And when Alejandro talks about looking for the low-hanging fruit on degraded land, what he's talking about there is identifying biological hotspots. Where do you have something growing, anything growing? And those are the places you want to focus on first, not the areas that are just bare soil. And so you first identify the existing biological hotspots and work there and grow that out. Biology actually grows out, much like throwing a pebble into a pond, and you get the ripple effect, right? You throw a pebble into a pond, and the ripples are very small and concentrated around where the pebble entered the water initially. But then what happens? The ripples go further and further and further out through the pond until they reach the shores of the pond. It's the same way with identifying biological hotspots, focusing the efforts of our animals there first. We actually grow that biology out. So we call that the biological ripple effect. So you can also take bale grazing and create biological hotspots everywhere that you bale graze. If you remember the pictures that Alejandro showed you of the cow patties, where all of the vigorous growth was growing up from the cow patties, that's what we see where we're bale grazed. But now picture hundreds and thousands of these cow patties all concentrate, around where you bale grazed. And in every single one of those cow patties, new seedlings emerging and growing, because that cow patty is the perfect medium for new seedling growth. And now you've got another biological hotspot that you can begin to ripple out and continue that growth process.
Mm-hmm.
Would like to add into Alan's comments and talking about the cow pies. Actually, I don't know if you remember, I showed a picture of a loose manure.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, that's not good for anyone, because that means that your cows are actually eating too much protein, and that will show up later on as some health problems like pink eye because of the accumulated ammonia on the bodies. Plus, also the cows may be ended up overeating up to 30% of your forage, because they're getting into this very expensive process of trying to keep their pH balance. And you're throwing too much protein into them. That usually happens when you're turning your cows too soon into the grass instead of just waiting. Now, the genetics that we're talking about are genetics that can take not huge amounts of just pure green grass, but also because of the long rest periods. Ideally, you will graze parts of your ranch that are stockpiled, but they already got the rains. So you got a lot of dry matter with some green, and those cows that you're selecting for should try and keep a good body condition on that kind of mixed grass, dry, yellow, and green. That's what we're striving for. And I don't know if the genetics in most ranches are actually, all of us have, but we have to select for it.
Mm. Alejandro, you've mentioned several times that growing grass isn't the problem, it's the water that's often the biggest challenge. Could you share a little bit about your first steps or one or two things that you did just to get started in developing more water opportunities on your ranch?
Yeah, well, we learned the hard way because one of the worst experiences you can have as a rancher is seeing your cows not having water. So that's kind of a issue with having faith in what you're doing and actually thinking that you may increase 3-4 times your herd. So I ended up putting like a 1.5 inch, and that wasn't sufficient. So my goal in my ranch is to have just one herd, because the more herds you have, the more work you're gonna have, the more supervision and so on. So right now that I know, we're putting a 3-inch main line that we will be able actually to pressurize later on to keep that one herd. So one of the first things you actually should be doing is try to combine your herds into to have a few herds as possible, and also to set aside some parts of your ranch for. There has been even occasions where the ranchers decided to sell most of his cows to provide that so needed rest period for his grasses. Just by resting your grasses, you will multiply your biomass.
Thanks, Alejandro. Bill, I want you to know I did not miss your question. I'm just kind of grouping a lot of these together by like topic. So I'm coming back to that, I promise. Alan, you answered this one in the chat box, but because we're also recording and want to be able to have folks get to see this later, I want you to be able to address it here. Chelsea asked, when considering where and how to start implementing new practices, is it fair to say that those 6 principles of soil health are in sequential order? Address number 1 first, knowing your context, and then start moving down the line.
That will be correct. If you don't address them in order, you're making a big mistake. And don't cherry pick. We see farmers and ranchers way too often try to pick from the 6. Oh, well, that's my favorite. I can do that. I'm going to do that. It doesn't work that way. You have to implement all 6 principles, and if you don't, you're going to be frustrated. You may make a little bit of progress, but then that progress will stop, and you'll just get frustrated, and then your conclusion will be, well, the 6 principles don't work. Well, you didn't apply the 6 principles. You applied 1 or 2 of them, and you applied them out of context. See, that's why context must be the first. So as I said when I first started my presentation, context is critical for the application of the other 5 principles. So yes, apply them in sequential order and don't cherry pick. Apply all 6 over time.
Thanks. And Alan, I have to imagine that connects to that idea, the rule of compounding, right? Like that all of those things working together compound their results. So it's got to work in tandem.
That will be correct. Exactly.
Right. And Alejandro, same. I appreciate that you're answering in the chat box. But for other folks, I want to have you share out loud Bill's question about when you put all your cattle into one herd and you're running your replacements with the mature herd, do you have a little more fallout with those younger animals, or how do you adapt your management to be managing those animals in one large group?
Yeah, we used to actually run the heifers separate from the herd, and we try different ways of keeping them together. Like, well, beginning it was in the corral, then the fence line weaning, then the nose ring, and then we said, well, let's ask the cows to wean those cows. And that actually means that we are doing this late weaning, but now most of our cows are now weaning their calves, so we're able to keep them in just one herd. And actually we sold the steers, so that's not a big deal. There are always a few cows that will not be able to, or they just let a big effort to actually get milk. So we sell those cows. Mhm. But it's been, I mean, that's why we say that genetics, actually, there's nobody that will sell you what you need in your ranch. So you have to spend some time observing your cows. You have to be strict on your cows, and then you ended up exactly with what you need. For example, I can tell you, what breed do you have? Do you have Angus or Hereford? Well, no, even if I have Angus, I will not have Angus. I will have Las Damas Angus. I mean, each herd has to be tailored, customized for each ranch.
So another question when it comes to those inputs, Linda asked, can you, if you would both just share your opinions on some of the trendy additives for boosting rangelands? Her examples are spreading compost or biochar or biostimulant sprays, doing feed through humates and seeds with cows. And her comment to your comment earlier, it's so tempting to think of that adding something. But maybe the main additive is Alejandro's comment of rest, patience, and faith. Could you guys comment a little bit about some of those things?
So relative to adding any kind of additive, it's yet another input. So what have you accomplished besides spending more money? And here's the thing to remember. If you believe there's a certain input that's going to help you, the only thing that's going to help you, folks, is building diversity and building biology. Okay, plain and simple. And particularly if you want to optimize net profitability, you got to build diversity, you got to build biology. And if you believe there's an additive that's going to help you, and you just buy and apply that additive, but you don't follow it up with application of the principles and the rules, you've wasted your money. I'm just going to be very straightforward about that. It's a waste of your money. You may see a momentary bump, and then it's gone. It's done because you did not implement principles to follow that up. And if you, a lot of these things, you know, for instance, if you buy biological additives, you've got to remember that if you're applying living biology and you're not keeping the biology that's currently in the soil alive, how are you going to keep the biology that you're buying and applying alive? It's going to die too shortly after you apply it. So again, it's a waste of your time and money. So I totally agree with Alejandro. You know, applying the principles, applying the rules, and being patient is by far the better way. As I wrote in the comment box, you never ever spend your way to profitability. It's impossible.
Yeah, I would like to add into Alan's comment that something we have done always at the ranch is to raise the bar for our cows, raise the bar for our management. For example, we went to 55 pastures, grazing 3 times per year. We didn't like that. Now we have this year that it did rain. I mean, last year we got 10 inches. So right now we're running our one herd on through 800, 1,000 paddocks. So that was kind of hard to believe, but that's what we're doing. And some people are kind of concerned and saying, oh, well, that takes a lot of work to move your cows daily or twice a day. As long as you have a good water system, I mean, we're going to spend some money, I mean, not our time, but money on something. It gotta be on a water system, because with this kind of management, if the water system is kind of shaky or chippy or things like that, your people are gonna start, I mean, people are gonna start spending too much time on taking care of the water. And for example, another is just, we keep raising the bar for the cows. We used to win at 4 months, then 6 months, then 8 months, then 10 months. And then suddenly at 10 months, most of the cows were already weaned. So we say, well, let's ask the cows to sell wean so we don't have to have 2 herds. The other thing is that we have a lot of mountain lions, and the best protection for our cows is small paddocks, tight paddocks, and we also added donkeys. Right now we're running like 15 donkeys. I do expect to have probably 40 donkeys, something significant. But we did not do it actually initially for the protection of the herd. We did it because, first of all, the donkeys can keep pretty smart to begin with, and then they can keep a pretty good body condition on very rough forage. So, and they're all eating something that the cows are not eating. So I do prefer to have a plant converted into manure than just standing there. So that's what actually Alan mentioned about diversity. So we're trying to mimic nature. We want the diversity of animals. And the donkey was a pretty good animal that doesn't need to take, you don't have to take care of it, and so on. So.
Thanks, Alejandro. A question that came from Chelsea. Do either of you have experience or examples of successfully working with government partners to implement some of these principles on public grazing lands? For many Western U.S. landowners, them included, this is a huge part of their grazing program, and they feel like they often meet the most hurdles when it comes to implementing ideas on public grazing land. Can you share a little bit, Alan? You said that you guys are currently working on some public land and with some of these grazing principles. Can you share a little bit of your experiences?
Yeah, many of our clients in the West, have BLM and even U.S. Forest Service permits, and some state permitted land as well. So we've worked with all of that and do work with all of that very extensively. As a matter of fact, we've got millions of acres that are of publicly grazed lands that we're working with right now. So the key here is it can be very challenging. You're dealing with a massive agency. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And so the key here is, first, you've got to find a champion. You've got to find somebody within the field offices, that you can talk with and you can express these concepts to. And we've been able to successfully do that. But they have bosses, right? And they can only do what their administrators will allow them to do in the local field offices. So then we have to have meetings with their administrators, to get that further buy-in. And we do that. And oftentimes we have to help them find language in their own manual. There is language within the BLM manuals, U.S. Forest Service manuals, and all of that allows for what they call experimentation and trials, on rangeland. And believe it or not, many of them aren't even aware of that. And so we help gently point out in their own manuals what can be done so that they feel comfortable and will work with you in this regard. So it's like anything else in life. It's about working with their dynamics, developing key relationships with the BLM personnel, and then developing a plan with some documentation to that plan, to move forward. And when we do all of that, and that takes patience, okay? It's not going to happen overnight. But when we go through that process with them, that's when we're able to successfully work with them and to get some good things done.
Alan, that's a perfect segue. I intentionally left this question for the end because I think that, I don't know, you guys can tell me I'm wrong, but I think you're going to say that this is probably one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. And Bill, early in the Q&A, asked about how have you developed a ranch team? How many folks do you need? How long did it take to get a good working team in place? Tell us about your management style, because my assumption is that all of this is for naught if you don't have people on the ground who can execute the plans, right? And Alan, you made some great comments there about building relationships and that human element to your ability to make these management choices. Tell us a little bit about what that looks like on the ground for you guys.
Alejandro, why don't you start with that, and very specifically what you're doing at the Las Damas?
Yes, thank you, Alan. Actually, it's very important for me to relate very close to my people. I actually I eat with them when I'm at the ranch. I listen to them. I mean, all of us just mess it up and make mistakes. I never kind of pinpoint those mistakes because that's how we learn. So I'm always looking for someone who will be better than me. I don't want to be essential. Actually, I don't want to be required there, and which we actually educated my people. They're pretty good because they're really good observants. But I think we build the confidence on them to actually carry on and be better than actually ourselves. That's probably been key. My foreman has been there since he was 17. He's already there for 20 years. So it's really, really important to have a continuity on this because remember, more than a science, this is not an art of knowing every square meter of your ranch, how that's going to behave, how you're going to change the dynamics of how much time they're going to stay. And there's so many variables that actually doing this detailed planning, I would say we're just wasting our time because the more brittle the environment, the more important it is for you to be actually adaptive, flexible, change directions, change time, change the size of the paddock, and keep working on your genetics. But every year is different, and that you can only do that with someone who will become an artist on managing grasslands.
Alejandro, could you just share a little bit more about your team, how big it is, how many people, how like Bill asked, how long did it take you to find those people and build that team up that you have in place now?
Yeah, we do have, my people are native Americans in Mexico, and they are really very good at observing because one of their first job is to take care of the goats or the family. So they have intrinsic that capability. I have my foreman. He does actually is on top of everything. When I say on top of everything, well, it takes them, if the water is there, everything is okay, it won't take them more than 2 hours a day. So they got to do something else. But I'm not really caring for how many hours they put, but how much they produce. So they're really very productive in a couple hours because they're giving a new plate to the cows, and that's it. I mean, that's what it takes. So I have the foreman, I have one cowboy, and I have one shepherd. And if we need to do some investment on new fencing or water system or something, then I bring contractors to do that work, or add more people on a seasonal basis. But really, having just one herd, that's like the huge benefit. I mean, you're just doing exactly the same. And because we don't really struggle with calving problems, we don't struggle with that stuff, and we spot the problems early on. That's why it's so important for us to spend time with our cow herd, because you're spotting that cow that is struggling, and you don't wait until that cow requires some kind of treatment or something.
Alan, anything you'd like to add there about the human element of management and building a team? You're muted here, Alan.
Yes, I was trying to find myself in all the pictures of everybody to unmute myself. So sorry about that. I was going through the line there. So, obviously Alejandro, myself, Gabe Brown, Shane New, many of others of us within Understanding Ag, again, we all have our own farms and ranches, but yet we're on the road a lot, right? Consulting and teaching and so forth. Now, how can we do that and be away from our farms and ranches? It's exactly what Alejandro just said. We work hard with our people. We train them, we educate them, but then we let them do their job, and trust them to do their job. So that's the first key, is just develop, training them, educating them, and then allowing them to develop, to make mistakes. And we view every mistake as a learning experience. And so instead of jumping down somebody's throat on our farm when they make a mistake, what we do is we sit down, we talk about it, we say, well, what happened and what did you observe and why do you think this happened and how do we prevent it next time? So that we're not just repeating the same mistakes over and over. The other thing that you have to do is realize that they are going to do things differently than me. And at first, I know for me, that was a struggle, right? Because I had learned how to do all of this and well, I wanted them to do it my way, right? But that doesn't work. They have to do it their way. And we have to trust their observations. So the key thing I tell our people every single day is don't go through the day with this task list that I must get task 1 through 10 done and check them off and then great, good, we're out of here. I tell them the most important task you can do every single day is take time to observe. And if they do that first, and they're always observing, truly observing, guess what? Their decision-making will automatically get better and better because now they're making decisions not off of a checklist, a task list, but they're making decisions based on what they are truly astutely observing every day. And by doing that, it has really been a game changer. And that's why we all feel comfortable. Like I'm in Missouri today. I'm not back home on the farm, but I feel very comfortable that things are going well because, our folks there are doing their job and especially they're observing every single day.
Yeah, and I can share with you what happened at some point, for example, in my ranch where we got an area of the ranch that did not rain. And I got one of my cowboys, the foreman wasn't there, I wasn't there. So he called me and he said, I'm gonna move the cows there. But I never told him that he had to adjust the times. I mean, he was just trying, like we always say, he just followed formula. And then immediately the cows that were pregnant, at that time, they started aborting. So we always, when we have a problem, and then, well, obviously the cows were doing their what they're supposed to do, eat whatever is not there healthy. So if we were pretty conventional on our thought, we will go there and kill the cows, right? But we always go and take a look at the mirror in ourselves and say, what's going on here? I mean, why that reaction or that spike on abortions? Obviously, we did not modify the timing or the size of the paddock. We were going through, the cows were hungry, because remember, you can have all the grass in the world, but if you're not moving the cows at the right time, they will always be hungry. So you gotta actually be more on the safe side, saying in the morning, are the cows full? Are they calm? Okay, or are they laying down? Well, we're fine. So the cows really give you a lot of feedback, always are giving you feedback. It's up to us whether we're paying attention or not for our cows. So at that time, we did not do anything with the cows. We recognized what was the problem and we learned from it.
Thank you, Alejandro. I want us to start wrapping up here. I want to close with one last question. I said at the beginning that Rancher Stewardship Alliance's mission statement is ranching, conservation, communities, a winning team. And we've spent a lot of tonight talking about ranching and conservation or stewardship. What can you tell us about community and how important that is to implementing some of these practices and changes? You've both touched on this in different ways, but I want us to just end with some of your thoughts on the value of community in these ideas.
Go ahead, Alejandro.
Yeah, I mean, for at least in my case, I was really very blessed to have people practicing holistic management when I joined the ranch, because it's that kind of community that really gives you support when you need it. And you just grab the phone and call them. And also, we just need to keep in mind that even our words or vocabulary, the way we see things is different from the conventional ranchers. So it's really like a human need to actually communicate the excitement that is going on at the ranch. And you always have to have that community. You'll find it. I mean, if you look for it, you will find it, those guys that will be your new friends. You know, I'm not saying that, but we have seen cases where even people are pretty hard on regen ranchers, but you got to build that community because we cannot do it alone. Even going beyond that communication, we think sometimes that having that ranch failing next to you is a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing. I think we need to try to help the neighbors, at least the ones that are open. Because, for example, in my case, I cannot be an island of grass in the middle of nowhere. It will hit me. That's not sustainable. So we gotta work with our communities, with our neighbors. Everybody's on the same boat.
And that is what we focus heavily on for everybody that attends the Soil Health Academy, is we work hard to develop a new network of support for them. Through fellow academy participants. So both at the academy, you know, we help them to forge new friendships, new relationships. And then after the academy is over, we help to facilitate the strengthening of those relationships on an ongoing basis. And we provide various ways for that to be done. But that is crucial to us, is that you are establishing that network of peers that are going through this as well, and experiencing the same challenges, the same issues, the same problems. And when you have that network of support from your peers, it always works a whole lot better, because you're no longer going through any of this alone.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Alan, Alejandro, and thank you to each one of you who joined us tonight. Like Alan and Alejandro just said, that couldn't be a better way to close our evening together, is that we appreciate that you've invested in taking time to be a part of this community and to learn together and to share together. And we hope that you will get to come back and see some more familiar faces from this workshop again, and continue to learn together in community. So Alan, Alejandro, thank you again. We appreciate you so much. Angel's going to put a link to a post-event survey in the chat box. It's there right now. If you guys wouldn't mind taking 5 minutes to click on that link right now and share some feedback. We also ask for future speaker suggestions as our committee starts planning who we want to have in these rural resilience webinars in the future. We look back on that feedback and we take your suggestions seriously. So we really appreciate that. And with that, we'll just note that this recording will be on our YouTube channel soon. We'll also have a few other links there in the chat box, and we'll send this as an email. Also, we have some ways to connect with Alan and Alejandro through their understandingag.com, and then a couple of links that Alejandro shared that you can learn more. One more note, I just want to throw this out there, and I appreciate that Stacy reminded us again, the mark your calendars now for August 2nd in Great Falls, Montana for the Montana Range Tour, where Alejandro will be presenting there and be with us in Montana for 2 days. So with that, we want to say thank you again, Alan, Alejandro. We're giving you a big round of applause out here in virtual Zoom land. We appreciate you, and we're just grateful that you spent your time with us tonight in our Rancher Stewardship Alliance community. Thank you so much.